ton of work being a student and organizing everything, and we just wanted to give a moment of appreciation. So we'll do that moment when she comes back.
Considering like this is the midterm season and she's the director, we just wanted to appreciate her, but
we'll do it when she comes back.
We can do that later.
The second item was that in the spirit of being inclusive to all, we wanted to just make a note that if our volume at any point isn't good for you, because we know that hearing loss is an existing issue, and one of your speakers here has a hearing loss, and so given speakers, we wanted to check our volume with you. So as a quick mic check, how is this volume? Would you like me to be louder, or would you like me to be a little bit quieter, just for comfort? Yeah. Everything's okay? And what about yourself? Ramon, please give us a sound check.
Mic check. Yeah.
Excellent.
Right.
Well, now that you're back, we
just wanted to appreciate everything you're doing as a director and as a student.
Yeah, so thank you so much for all of the coordination that you've had to make this happen, and we're just so happy to be here.
No, we're happy that you guys are here.
Yes, really excited for this. Whenever you start, I'll just start the timer.
We will let you know. Just one last thing is that we want to give a little bit of a
disclaimer
that our presentation is slightly unconventional. And so just go with it. We're here to have fun, and at some point we will be asking for the help of 2 volunteers. And we'd love for them to be the judges, but we know that you're busy. So if you're not willing to do that, then we have some other plans.
So feel free if you want to volunteer.
Yes.
This?
Ready?
Let's do it.
All right, we are officially ready. Hey, Ramon.
Hey, Laurel.
How's it going today?
Not too bad. How are you?
You know what? I'm getting incredibly excited. We'll be graduating as electrical engineers in just a few months.
Oh my gosh, I know. Like all these hard works, all these hours of putting in time and having no social life. I mean, I'm so excited for it to end.
Me too. But I guess that means I will no longer have an excuse to ghost my mother when she calls to ask why the Wi-Fi's out again.
Oh man, I'm pretty bad responding too. Like, when it comes to this, I'm also the tech go-to person for my family.
Is anybody else a tech go-to person for their family?
Yeah.
And if you're not, then you have somebody that you're always calling for your tech go-to.
Everyone has a tech person.
Well, Ramon, why don't you tell us the most recent time that you had to be the tech go-to person for your family?
Okay, so for me, usually whenever our Wi-Fi tends to slow down, my parents like to go, can you help me? So what I do is, with my 4 years of electrical engineering experience, I go up to the box, I grab the plug, I unplug it, and I plug it back in, and they say, wow, you're magic. So
the magical restart of turning it off and turning it back on again.
Yeah, that's the power of hacking the Wi-Fi or resetting.
It only took us 4 years to be able to learn that one.
That's the magic of just electrical engineering.
That's totally fair. Well, for me, the most memorable experience I had wasn't a time that I had to fix anything. It was actually when my grandparents called me. They were so excited to tell me that not only were they on the phone with me, but they were also on the internet, which meant that, in their opinion, they were internet wizards. They had just upgraded from dial-up in 2008 to wireless, and for them, they thought that they were ahead of the times.
Wow. I mean, when did that happen?
In 2008.
2008?
Dial-up upgrade 2008 to wireless.
I mean, I thought dial-up died in the late 90s to early 2000s.
Well, I know that I upgraded from dial-up to wireless in the early 2000s, but my grandparents wasn't until 2008.
It's so strange. I mean, why did that take so long?
Well, they are Canadians, but they live in the mountains in the middle of nowhere.
I mean, mountains, regions shouldn't really be an issue, should it?
But it is.
But it is. So what happens is, in our country, there are huge expanses of internet inequality.
Based on population density and geography.
That's right. So let's focus on this. This issue, the digital divide, is a Canadian issue and also an international issue that affects more than just us.
The digital divide is real. Well, let's go ahead and hop into an example.
Yeah, let's. So we're now at CEC, and we came from the West Coast. So let's say we drove to CEC all the way over there and we took Highway 1. For the most part of the trip, you would have had some kind of internet connectivity, some signal.
Well, what we're talking about is all the area that's covered in yellow here is the minimum internet speed that Canada provides. This internet speed is enough for you to open one web browser, or on your phone, it looks like 1 bar of connectivity. That's enough for you to reach out to your family, check in, say, hey, I made it to Winnipeg. This trip's going well so far. But it's also enough for you to be able to call emergency services should anything happen.
But here's the issue. That's for areas where there is a yellow highlight. But as you can see over there in Vancouver and over here in Ontario and Quebec, there's huge expanses of no yellow. And do you guys know why that is?
Geography and population density.
That's right. So when it comes to this, and we'll take a closer look at BC and Ontario, what we can see is that there's a huge stretch of land where there's just no yellow and heavily reliance on satellites.
These satellite icons indicate satellite-dependent communities. There are huge expanses of both of these major provinces that don't even have the minimum internet and connectivity. They rely solely on satellites.
That's right. So for our case with Canada, all of our beautiful sea sky scenery, it makes it really hard for us to set up infrastructure for rural communities. So that is the issue that we're trying to touch. So now,
given that we know that the digital divide exists, and we have a little bit of an understanding of what that means.
Yeah, so why does this matter, and should we even care?
True, but have we all seen the loading icon before? I know that a few years ago when we all had to adjust to go into an online world, it was a tough adjustment to be solely reliable on our internet. It was second year for you and me in our electrical engineering degree.
Yeah, like pretty much the start of COVID.
Yeah, we started COVID when we were back home, and I remember the first day of classes. I was ready to go, 10 minutes early, had everything set up. All of a sudden, my power went out.
Oh.
Not only was I in darkness, but I also had no internet. So
yeah, what did you do? That sounds like an issue.
It wasn't a great time. So the only thing I could come up with was to pack up my laptop and spend the first day of online school in a McDonald's parking lot.
Ugh.
That's
kind of
super rough. This loading icon was my day.
Well, I mean, for my personal experience, I mean, I didn't have to go through that. Mine's a little simpler. I have a family of 5 where I have my mom, my dad, my brother, and my sister. And what happens is with everyone trying to connect to something, and this just limited Wi-Fi pie, not everyone gets a quality slice.
And I mean, that would have happened every single day that you were at home.
Yeah, so we're all staring at this throbber.
Throbber? I've always just referred to it as a spinning circle of doom.
Oh, well, I mean, that's what we have synonyms for. So, moving on, Canada does acknowledge that the digital divide is an issue that they have been trying to fix for a while. So, environmentally, because of this digital divide, that means our landscapes are pretty much safe, but that is the issue.
Wow.
It also touches,
Sorry, go ahead.
it totally touches areas like political, social, and economics.
And starting politically, let's think about the fact that there are so few residents in these rural communities, and they're so far from the urban centers that to provide even a basic internet service to them would take a lot of taxpayer dollars. And politically speaking, in history, spending a majority of the taxpayer dollars on a very small portion of the population doesn't end well.
Totally. And when it comes to the social effects, when it comes to this, rural communities are already struggling to receive education and emergency services. So with now Wi-Fi being an issue, not only does this digital divide affect them with connectivity, it's also expanding that social divide.
That doesn't sound very Canadian.
No, it's not.
But again, because these rural communities are so far from the urban centers, the amount of supplies and resources would take so much more than even to connect 100 people in a rural community compared to millions in the suburban area.
Right. So I guess now.
Well, we know the digital divide exists. We know that Canada has acknowledged that it exists, including the government, but
yeah, what can we do? What can we do to have some way that makes Wi-Fi not just available, but also on par with areas like ours, some urban centers?
Now that sounds more Canadian.
Yeah, some equalities. So let's take a look at some headlines. So it says here that Trudeau promises to connect 98% of Canadians to high-speed internet by 2026.
Now that sounds ambitious.
Totally.
But given that the government dictated that broadband internet is a basic service in 2016, sounds like it's an achievable goal. But broadband internet, if we refer back to the map that we saw earlier with all the yellow, which was the minimum internet speeds that Canada currently has, that was 10 megabit per second download speeds. Broadband internet is 50 megabit per second download speeds.
That's like 5 times faster.
Quick maths.
Thank you, I'm an
Well
engineer.
done.
So, now let's take a look at some timelines as we want to get some ambition to our goals and set in stone. So, if we look at this from 2014 to 2022, that's a span of about 8 years. What happened is we achieved a growth of 14.5%.
And for the following 8 years, from 2022 to 2030, the growth is expected to be 6.5%.
That's right. So, in about the same amount of time, 8 years, we went from 14.5 to 6.5.
That is quite a slowdown in growth over the same time period of 8 years.
Right, and the reason why that happens is it involves all the logistics and planning involved in setting up new infrastructure for these hard-to-reach Canadians.
Makes sense. If there's existing infrastructure, it would be easier to upgrade, but with non-existing infrastructure, it would cost more and be harder to do. And Trudeau has articulated this as being the hardest to reach 5%.
Yeah, so let's take a look at another example. So over here on the west coast, we have some islands, and Vancouver Island being the most notable.
That's true. And lots of those islands, including Vancouver Island, are inhabited, but don't have internet access.
Yeah, it's actually only now are they starting to receive funding to just build up on their existing infrastructure.
This recent donation or contribution by the Government of Canada indicates that a group of under 100 households in an area cost over $1 million to upgrade the existing infrastructure. Less than 100 people for over $1 million.
Oof. Let's see. $1 million for 100 households? That's like $11,000 per household.
That sounds quite a stretch, given that we're only upgrading infrastructure, not building new.
Yeah, that's another thing that we need to consider. So, let's see here.
Well, from coast to coast, sea to sky, the Government of Canada has been adamant that we need to be upgrading the existing resources and that broadband internet is an essential service for all Canadians. And in that attempt, even the Premier of Newfoundland and Labrador agrees that the broadband internet spurs economic growth and improves access to a range of services from healthcare to educational opportunities.
That's right. So for Canada, this inequality of internet for Canadians, it has a real impact. So clearly, the government agrees that this is an issue, but now the question is, how do we go about doing this?
Well, I know that my internet is connected from my house using copper cables to the telephone pole outside.
Yeah, so I remember when I was in grade 10 back in high school, TELUS came by to our house and upgraded our copper cable from 10 gigabits per second to fiber optic that runs now 69 terabits per second.
That's like 1,000 times faster.
Yeah, and now that's quick maths. So, with all that, I mean, what's our other solution? So what are we doing now?
Well, I know that existing infrastructure, the current construction environment is not even using telephone poles anymore.
Yeah, what we're doing is we're going underground.
Underground. I wonder if they got that idea from the West Coast again, because Vancouver Island is connected to Vancouver with internet cables that go under the ocean.
Yeah, so underground, underwater, there's some parallels going on there. I guess we just really love hidden cables.
Well, I think it adds in a little bit of protection. Given the amount of windstorms and snowstorms we had this year that brought power lines down, gave us blackouts, internet access to deviations, going underground sounds like the way to go.
Right, so when it comes to this, well, if we hide all of our cables underneath something, then that pretty much implies that the environment can heal itself.
Well, if I'm thinking about the ability to actually install the cables, and at that time, I feel like the destruction of the environment for installing the cables underground is actually more than putting the cables on the telephone wires.
Oh, so in terms of destruction, when it comes to going underground or maybe setting up some telephone poles, it's relatively the same, but the huge issue is that if you do run telephone poles, then that just ruins the scenery and the landscape.
Plus, as you mentioned, when you go underground, the environment has a chance to heal itself. But with the telephone poles, we still need to maintain the area because there needs to be maintenance done on the poles all the time.
Right, and so other than that one, there is some obstacles that we have to overcome.
Well, I mean, look at this dragon here. He's trying to go up, down, away, along, through. I mean, we need to make all those considerations when we're thinking about cables too, because Canada's not flat.
It's definitely not. There's stuff like mountains that we have to figure out.
Right? I mean, and they're made of rock.
Yeah, so we can't easily go under.
And we can't easily go over. You know what? We've been doing a lot of talking.
Yeah, there's all these options, but I don't want to just stare at a photo. I want to do something about it.
And I learn best hands-on.
Yeah, and I'm a visual learner, so why don't we
do a demo?
Yeah.
So at this point, we'll ask for a volunteer to let themselves be known. You don't need to stand up to do anything yet. Oh, excellent volunteer. We love that. So hang out where you are. We'll be right with you and call you up shortly. And Ramon here, have some resources.
Thank you. So let's say I'm a powerhouse and I have a huge population density and I have existing infrastructure for internet.
And let's say that I live in this urban area and therefore have access to exactly the same internet.
Right, you're my neighbor. Whatever my benefits are, you can have it too.
The amount of resources to keep us both connected is pretty minimal.
Yeah, I mean, I can keep my costs low while giving her the same benefits.
And since we're Canadians, we're free to roam. So I'm gonna go ahead and move across the country.
Whoa, hold up. My resources.
Hey, but we're both Canadians. We're all Canadians. We all deserve equal access to all the resources.
I know, but I'm so big and your population's so small. I mean, is all this cost really worth it?
We're all Canadians. We all deserve equal access to everything that's available.
You're right. I think I should start thinking about it.
But, again, Canada's not flat.
No, it's not. There are obstacles in the way.
I would say some beautiful natural landscapes.
Let's.
Well, we'll get our volunteer to come on up now and emulate the beautiful natural landscape of a mountain. Please, just stand in between Ramona and myself and just be an impediment. Oh,
thank you.
mountain.
Well, I like the peak.
This is an excellent natural
No,
beauty.
actually, this is proper.
This is perfect.
Okay.
So, you'll notice here that there's actually some tension on the cable as we're trying to go around the mountain.
Yeah, so if I move over here, that's even more resources that we're using.
And, I mean, if there was any sort of kink in the line or a break, the amount that we would need to replace is astronomical.
Yeah, and referring back to the picture of the dragon, maybe I don't want to go around, maybe I want to go through?
Ouch!
Oh, okay, right. Yeah, my bad. Maybe
I don't
not
think going
quite.
through is a great idea.
Okay, I mean, we mentioned maybe going under.
Well, I know that a lovely volunteer here can jump over the rope, but that doesn't mean that an actual mountain can.
Yeah, I don't think mountains can skip rope.
Well, our only other option that I can think of,
Just maybe go over.
well, seems to be okay, but we did require a couple more resources.
Yeah, but I mean, it's out of the way, right? But again, because it's exposed to the environment, it can experience environmental effects like maybe wind.
Whoa!
Oh, snap. So that's a huge issue that we do need to account for, because that's maintenance that we need to do.
Plus, our beautiful natural landscape, like mountains, are usually in protected parks, provincial parks, glaciers, areas where we are not going to be installing telephone cables and telephone wires, and that's just not good sense for a beautiful environment.
Yeah, and like, I like to go hiking, and what if I go take a photo? And, you know, if I look at my photo, there's cables everywhere.
Yes, Ramon, forget about the environment. It's all about your Instagram.
Sorry, my bad. I like to keep my feet clean.
Well, thank you so much to our volunteer.
Thank you, thank you.
And as Ramon cleans up his resources here, I need to catch up a little because we talked a lot up there.
Yeah,
Let's do a bit of a summary. So, politically speaking, we know that the government of Canada acknowledges that the digital divide exists. They are putting finances forward, and they have a goal of 2030 broadband internet to all Canadians. But the financial cost of that isn't exactly the smartest idea, and as Trudeau articulated, the final 5% is going to be the hardest to reach.
Right, and in terms of social effects, because I'm such a powerhouse, like what we saw over there, and all of my infrastructure is already built, it's all of the benefits come to me first, and then Laurel, being the smaller demographic, becomes a second-class citizen where all of hers comes after me.
Well, I mean, the amount of resources it required to give me equal access being so far away, it was comparable to, I mean, there was hundreds of people that could have been helped in that suburban area for the amount it cost just to reach one person in a rural community.
Right, so it starts to kind of touch upon subjects like, is this worth it? But we want to keep equality.
And the government says by 2030, equal access for all Canadians.
Right, but now, also, we can also touch upon the environment.
That beautiful natural environment.
For an environment.
Thank you.
Whether we go through, around, under, or over, it doesn't matter, it always gets affected in some negative way. So, now, what should we do?
Well, I know that our landscape is beautiful.
Yes.
Canada, beautiful. From sea to sky.
And of course, running cable causes issues. So if our country and its beauty runs from sea to sky, perhaps our solution should also run sea to sky.
Parallax.
Of course. I'm a poet, anyways. So, the things that we want to touch up on, and for this case, there's two types of satellites. The first one we're going to talk about is high Earth orbit satellites, or HEOs.
These are the satellites we are most familiar with. They are the average Joe satellites, if you will. And you'll know my little stick figure average Joe with the satellite here. These satellites are relatively geostationary.
And if you don't know what geostationary is, stay tuned. So, what other facts do we have about HEO satellites? Well, they fly at a height of about 35,786 kilometers.
Approximately.
Approximately, and that's to put that in perspective, that's 16 days of non-stop driving.
Oh my gosh, all those kilometers, that would be like driving from the west coast to the east coast of Canada 6 times.
That sounds like a pretty good road trip.
I don't know, Ramon, I do like you, but 16 days in a car?
Yeah.
I don't believe you.
It's just half the money.
Well, moving on, let's talk about the other type of satellites, the low Earth orbit satellites, or LEO satellites. These ones fly at about 550 kilometers above the Earth.
Yeah, and from where we are at the CEC, that's about from here to Parliament Hill.
We can make it there in 6 hours.
Yeah, I mean, you know, if you don't want to do a half-a-month road trip with me, you want to go there and back for lunch?
Well, I think that 6 hours is way more reasonable than 16 days, and I'm pretty sure that I have a playlist so we can make that happen.
Neat, okay, I'll take that. So, the question now is, we have LEO and HEO, but what should we choose? What's the best option?
I have a few more questions than that.
I do too. And I think I love visuals again.
So, how about another demo?
Yes, how about another volunteer? Anyone?
Marcus, come on down! Marcus, we will get you to hold this gigantic, smooth blue ball, and please take on the responsibility of being Mother Earth.
Thank you.
Sorry.
So, what we'll do now is we're going to simulate flashlights. Or, sorry, not flashlights, satellites with flashlights.
So, with Marcus here being this perfectly smooth, beautiful Earth, and Ramon and I being satellites.
It's kind of hard to tell, but what we want to do is the light coverage is basically availability.
And the size that the light covers is, no, that's availability, but the density of the light, how bright it is the quality of the internet connection.
Right, so brighter means better, and more coverage means more coverage.
More people get help.
Right.
But at this distance, we're kind of like the high Earth orbit HEO satellites. And if the Earth was smooth, we could supply a connection to the entire Earth with just about 3 satellites.
Right, because our area of effect is so wide, we don't really need a lot.
No, and geostationary.
Right, so if you guys want to know what that means, this means that when our Earth rotates slowly to the left,
Let's turn to the left, please, Earth.
we can maintain that distance. So let's say I want to keep that area covered. Oh, back it up. Thank you.
Right.
So we can maintain that same area without using up much fuel. We don't have to be proactively consuming.
Yeah, because we follow the Earth at the same speed that it rotates.
So that is geostationary, geostationary.
But the Earth is not this smooth.
Right. So what if there's like an obstacle? Like, let's say that's a mountain.
Well, these HEO satellites are creating quite a shadow. And given that they're geostationary, that means that they're never going to be covering the area that is shaded.
Right.
They
So
will never get coverage.
the light is dim, so that's already bad connection or bad quality. And now there's a shaded region that will just never get covered.
So even though we could cover a large area, we're never going to reach the area that's shaded, and the quality of the internet is not that great.
Right. But what about the other satellite?
The LEO, low Earth orbit.
Time to get close.
Woo!
So as you can see with LEO satellites, the light is now smaller, the area of effect is less, so that means there's less coverage.
But the light is brighter, and therefore the quality of the internet has increased.
Right. So here's the thing, these LEO satellites are non-geostationary.
So that means that they actually spin faster around the Earth than the Earth orbits itself.
Right, so Earth, you don't have to move, but we'll be doing the moving because we'll be moving much faster than you.
Exactly. And this means that every area, even if it doesn't have coverage at this second, it will in the next second. But also with LEO, it requires more satellites to cover the same area as a HEO, because as we said, LEO being closer covers less area.
Right, so we would need to have a mesh of satellites, and that means more satellites to get the same coverage.
That's true.
Right. Anyways.
Thank you so much, our volunteer,
Thank
Mother
you, Earth.
You did an excellent job. Thank you,
Well,
Mother Earth. As the slide indicates by the pie chart here, the economics of the satellite community industry is growing. I mean, we have all heard of Starlink SpaceX. Additionally, Amazon has a Project Kuiper that they've been working with.
Right, and what we're kind of noticing is to traverse these landscapes, it kind of does make sense to move our stuff to space. Because it's a lot, what actually happens is it can be a lot cheaper than laying down pipe and running cables in the long run.
That's true. And speaking of Starlink, I recall recently that Elon Musk was helping out in Ukraine.
Ooh, sensitive topic, but yes. So there is a conflict going on between Russia and Ukraine. And what we get to see is the pros and cons of satellite communications.
Well, we get to learn that land-based internet connection is not only susceptible to the environment, but also to human intervention.
Right, so what happened is Russia was able to take down their Earth-based infrastructure, and Ukraine lost all of their connectivity. So Elon Musk stepped in.
It was so kind of him, but, I mean, with no ability to contact their family to say, I'm okay, or I need help, or for the government to talk to his military to say, how are we going to proceed? As soon as Elon Musk swept in, everybody accepted the terms and conditions because there was no other option.
Right, so because of this human intervention, sending stuff to space does have its benefits, that way no one can touch it. But it does pose that security risk because all of our traffic goes through one person, and you can kind of imagine you're browsing through your phone, your laptop, whatever, and that's like someone looking over your shoulder all the time.
And I mean, that monopoly just doesn't make sense. So to have government control over it, government intervention, makes way more sense and way more safety regulations.
Right, so that is a social-political issue that has to be touched. But how about the environment?
I'm glad you asked. Well, because of the going to space, we no longer need the infrastructure for digging holes for laying the cables, or as much infrastructure for the satellites and the telecommunication poles. But we do need to get to space, and that means rockets and rocket fuel.
Right, so as you mentioned, these LEO satellites, like Starlink, is non-geostationary.
Recall, that means that they spin faster around the Earth than the Earth itself rotates.
Right, so if they want to cover the same area,
That's what they're designed to do.
They are designed to do, we have to actively consume fuel just to maintain where we want to be.
That's true, and that means that we are using fuel to get out to space and to stay in space.
Yeah, so they don't really last forever. They will wear out, they will break down, and they will, of course, run out of fuel.
But wait, if there is a mesh of satellites in, and one of them starts to break down, wouldn't that satellite then potentially bump into another satellite, bump into another satellite, and all of a sudden all this entire mesh of satellites come crashing down and hit the Earth and the environment is completely distracted?
Hold up, breathe, Laurel. So, I forgot to mention, the end of life is designed for.
So they plan for the satellites to fail.
They do plan for the satellites to fail. So what happens is, when these satellites are reaching the end of their life, that's when they run out of fuel.
Whew. So I guess that would make sense because it would be probably cheaper to replace the satellite than it would be to send another satellite or some device up there to refuel it or to do any maintenance.
Right, it's a lot cheaper for us to just replace the satellite than to go through the maintenance and refueling costs. So there is another issue of space junk.
That's true because, I mean, although it's a controlled explosion to bring the worn out satellite down, it's not always going to burn up completely in the atmosphere. And what about uncontrolled? What if they die early? Does that mean that they're just going to float off into space?
Right, so what happens is at the end of their life, there is a controlled explosion, and what they're designed to do is these particles will enter our atmosphere and disintegrate. So not much effect. But that's only if it enters back into our atmosphere.
Fair. And given all of this information, I think that this is very clear. The current government agrees that the digital divide exists. They agree that it needs to be solved, and they've set themselves a goal of 2030. But by upgrading the existing infrastructure, we're not solving the digital divide. We're helping those that already have the minimum.
Right, so, you know, with all of this, it's kind of showing that we only have a binary option to either run cable or run satellite, and that's not really a lot of options. And, you know, that kind of just shows how much we really looked into this.
It's true. I mean, the existing options that government has been investing in includes satellites as well. And I think we need to go and talk to our constituents, talk to our political parties, and ask them to continue in future growth. Because laying cable, whether fiber optic or copper, is not the way to go for Canada.
Yeah, and if I remember correctly, what happened is for Ukraine, Elon Musk was asking for some support from the Pentagon, but they rejected him.
Oh, sorry.
So, anyways, here are some of our references for what we covered, and if you want to take a look, that's read it.
This is everything here from our presentation today, but we do have additional resources should you need any. If you have additional questions or you have more information on this particular area, we can point you in the right direction.
Great.
But
So
we're not done.
we're not done yet. Why did we choose the digital divide?
Why did you choose the digital divide, Ron?
Thanks for asking. So I chose digital divide because I always found telecommunications and wireless technology something really important.
Sure.
We find internet we kind of take it for granted because you never really know what you have until it's gone.
there. Deep.
Thanks.
For me, I love to learn, which is why I studied to become an electrical engineer. And I mean, the telecommunications industry is growing so quickly. I grew up with no internet, dial-up, wireless, high-speed internet, and now broadband is coming our way. And by 2030, it's an ambitious goal. And I want to know how the government would like to make that happen.
Well, it's important to stay informed.
All of us, it's important to stay informed.
Right. So with everything we discussed from the digital divide,
including the current cable technologies,
and its effects,
as well as where the technology may take us in the future.
perhaps our current solutions right now can be just as simple as,
Looking up to the skies.
or in this case, looking to our side.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. We're now open for
Ramon
questions.
and Laurel, and thank you to our volunteers. We greatly appreciate it. And Ramon and I are now available for questions. Should there be any?
I mean,
Yeah.
One of the early slides, we had the yellow on
On the maps,
Why did Alberta have so much yellow? Do you know?
it's flat.
it's flatter.
But so is Manitoba and Saskatchewan.
Oh my goodness, it's right in the
Imagine.
beginning. Yes.
Yeah, so what usually
Oh,
comes
yeah,
up to that is,
Saskatchewan.
yeah,
Yeah.
so if it's not based on geography, it's also population density. So that's what they
Additionally,
balance out.
the lakes. I mean, we talked about the mountains, but lakes are a big issue as well. You can't necessarily always lay cable under the lakes. I mean, they freeze, things happen. You can't protect everything. Going straight across the lake is not going to happen either.
Yeah,
Which
and
means
I think we also talked to somebody from New Brunswick, and he was 10 minutes away from a major university, and he said he grew up without Wi-Fi.
because it was just considered a rural community outside of the approved coverage zone.
They just thought it wasn't really good.
Well, maybe not yet.
Not yet. Hopefully not yet.
Any other questions?
Question, but I have comments.
We love comments.
Yeah, I really like how you presented, like including the elements of storms and
Oh,
and
cool.
also your energy.
Oh,
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
So-
We loved your energy too. We were kind of out of it. It's
Yeah,
fun.
we were kind of thinking, you know, you guys have to sit through a long presentation, and
A
we want
long
to keep it like
day of presentation.
entertaining somehow. Yeah, because you know, communications is all about not what you say, but how people receive it.
And I mean, we've been students for 4 years now. We've sat through those lectures and you're going,
Yeah.
this could have been an email.
Yeah.
So 30 minutes is a long time, so we're happy that you were engaged with it.
Very interesting topic here. It's not something that we hear about all that much. This is really interesting. Do you know if like other countries, like the States, for example, they probably have the same issues, right? But more dense populations are probably not as much.
They do have the same issues because honestly, well, their geography is from the same as ours. And, but they do have more companies that are open to doing LEO satellites and MEO satellites. And there's more trial areas there. Actually, the government of Canada is investing in a Canadian company to try out LEOs. And they're testing everything out in the States.
Is there any negative impact of LEOs?
Yeah, so what we mentioned is because LEO satellites are not geostationary, they consume fuel, and one of the major issues is what happens when it does run out of fuel. So that's where we mentioned there's a controlled explosion that sends the bits to disintegrate into our atmosphere, but it's only if it enters back into our atmosphere. It might stay there, and so space junk is one of the issues.
So though, you know, you can design for failure, which is why you say that the lifespan of your iPhone is 7 years. Upgrades happen, and sometimes it fails earlier, and sometimes you have to upgrade sooner.
It can be a probability.
But as we are moving to the satellite, do you guys think like the cost of the internet will come down? Because comparatively North America, the costs are much higher than other countries.
I think even if the costs come down, that doesn't really solve the issue of having no infrastructure to rural communities. So that's kind of what
the cost won't come